Hello, everybody, and welcome to an impromptu top 5. This was going to be a top 25, and then I realized that might be incoherent and nobody would want to watch it. I've used the community in a way that I just didn't think to utilize before, and so now we have the top 5 cards that we will be missing when they get retired into the legacy environment. And just for anybody who is kind of watching this at a different time or just has kind of not been aware, because I also think that there is a certain contingency of the community that just doesn't know. They play the game, they walk into the shop, they don't know that there's been this big change. We will be moving to a system where products in Fantasy Flight's living card games will be retired. They will no longer be printed, and basically we will have what is a legacy environment and a current environment. This is going to be focusing on the cards that we will be effectively losing to the legacy environment. And unless they get reprinted, which I think that there is absolutely a loophole for them to get reprinted back into that. Actually, at the end of this, we're going to go a little bit more in depth on the current and legacy topic just to kind of get right into it. But yes, I used my community tab to put up posts, and I originally picked 5 cards for each aspect, and then when it only gave me 4 options, I picked the 4 that I thought were probably going to be the most voted on by the community. We'll be going over what my 5th option is in a little bit, but right now, let's just get down to it. Let's talk about the top 5 cards that will be lost to legacy, that we will not be seeing anymore, that will just kind of fall out of the meta going forward. And we're going to start out with my protection card, which the community decided was the Night Nurse, in contention with Desperate Defense, Flow Like Water, and Electrostatic Armor. And then the hidden option that just didn't show up was Dauntless. But I think this one makes a lot of sense. I picked these 4 cards as the ones to get voted on because I thought that in terms of the things we would be losing once they get cycled out, and in my mind, what I was establishing this as was that cards that were printed basically from Sinister Motives backwards were probably going to be the cutoff. We don't know the cutoff at this point, but that was what I was going off of just to decide, okay, what cards basically from the beginning of the game to Sinister Motives, that wave, these could be cards that just we don't see anymore and that will not be what the game is being balanced around anymore. And I think that Night Nurses, it is a staple card. And if you are somebody who is going to try to stick with the current environment, I could see how that would be a card that you would very much miss out on. Desperate Defense, I will say, I think is a card that is emblematic of an archetype, but I think it's probably an archetype that will be able to exist without it. And if we need it, they can always reprint it again. But I think that it is a card that we don't necessarily, we're not going to necessarily feel as much. I do think it is important, but I don't think it's one that we're going to feel as much. Flow Like Water, I'm actually surprised did not see more votes because I feel like it is a archetype and a type of deck that a lot of people, when they talk about protection, it's the kind of deck they want to build. They want to use Flow Like Water. They want to be able to defend and get in this little extra damage. I think that it is kind of the early parts of a much larger deck that I go back so often to the Nightcrawler hero pack that it gave us so many ways to sort of like defeat minions on the villain phase. And I think that Flow Like Water and the other card, Electrostatic Armor, are kind of the early signs of that. And unfortunately, we're going to lose them. I do think that all 4 of these cards are cards that could very easily be reprinted into other places. We have seen something that I think is going to be a partial reprint, not a partial reprint, a functional reprint-ish kind of thing of Night Nurse with one of the cards that's coming out in Silk. She's got a card that it is not the same as the Night Nurse, but it sort of fills a similar role. It is an alter ego action that you need to do, but overall, like, these are cards that I'm going to miss, but I think Night Nurse is a very good pick, and if I were to really think about it, I think it would have been the card that I probably would have picked, because I do think that it is the one that it's going to impact us the most. Next up, we have our leadership card, which was in contention between Band Together, Sneak Attack, Strength in Numbers, Clarity of Purpose, and Go All Out was the card that just didn't make the list. And I do think that all these cards are emblematic of things to do in leadership. I think that leadership has moved a little bit past this, which is why I've put it at my number 4. This list is taking the community's notes and then saying, okay, which card am I going to miss the most out of the ones that got voted the highest? And I do think that Clarity of Purpose is a card that I'm going to miss, but it's not one that I use a whole lot. I would say that I am much more likely to use Band Together and Strength in Numbers in the same deck than I am to use Clarity of Purpose, but at the same time, I definitely see why Clarity of Purpose is a card that, if we don't see it reprinted, is going to be one that I think a lot of people are going to talk about and say, we're on this new thing in wave 15, but gosh, it was so nice. Clarity of Purpose was just the card, and it's unfortunate that now it's unobtainable by a lot of the player base. And it's a card that I hope does see a reprint, but if we don't, then it is going to be lost to time. Strength in Numbers and Band Together were definitely kind of cheating a little bit. Maybe I should have included Go All Out because it is more emblematic, but I do think that just Band Together, giving you a bunch of resources based on the amount of allies you have, and Strength in Numbers allowing you to have like some card draw in a way that we don't see across the rest of the game. Obviously, we see a tremendous amount of card draw at the end of turns, but during turns, card draw can be a little bit more hero dependent and sometimes aspect dependent, and Strength in Numbers was a good way to sort of make leadership good, at least in one version of its deck at card draw. And then Sneak Attack, I think, is just a dark horse. It was a card that I think had a lot of purpose, but in a way that I think other cards like Dive Bomb and Aggression, Sneak Attack sort of needed some of the cards that came out in the Magneto pack to really sort of feel fully formed. I think it had an absolute, it had a combo reason prior, I feel like, but it didn't really have a practical reason why you would say, I'm going to put this in a lot of decks. So it is a card that I think could very well be printed just about anywhere, but I can also see how it might not necessarily be at the top of Fantasy Flight's concerns in terms of what they want to build around and what they want to design around, because I think that it is a card that didn't really see a lot of purpose until now. So it might not be until the end of 2026 or 2027 when we even see it, because now there is actually a reason why we might want it. And this is all my own opinions. I don't actually know what Fantasy Flight is thinking. Maybe they've already identified that. They said, hey, now that we've put this in here, let's put this Sneak Attack into more hero decks or into a campaign expansion because we want to see it used more. Although maybe also it's just seen as a way to get around costs, and getting around costs in games other than Yu-Gi-Oh! Is often seen as a bad thing, because once you take away the cost and the cost means nothing, then what did you even make the cost for? So yeah, Sneak Attack is unfortunately going away, but I think I will miss Clarity of Purpose the most of all these cards, and I think that was the right call. Next up, we have the basic cards, which were pretty standard. We've got Sorcerer Supreme, Ironheart, Limitless Stamina, Sky Destroyer, and the secret track was Unshakable. And Unshakable, I think, was probably a good one to cut off because I don't know that anybody would have voted for it. But I guess this also gets into Basic is probably the hardest one to do, because I feel like Basic, either you're going to get reprints all the time, or they are so niche that they might be too powerful. And then so we might see something akin to Ironheart, but in leadership, or we might see something akin to the Sorcerer Supreme. That might be a bad example, but let's just keep going with the metaphor. We might see something akin to the Sorcerer Supreme, but in Justice. And Limitless Stamina might be a good basic card, but it might be too good, and so we might only see it in Protection. Don't even take the random assignments I gave as good examples, because I'm probably thinking of this incorrectly. But either way, Basic was hard because I do think that there were so many cards that are good, but I don't know are so good that they're not going to see a reprint. The Power in All of Us, I think, is a card that I don't want to call it a mistake, because I don't know that it's a mistake, but I feel like it's a very powerful card. And I feel like the existence of that card makes it so that you have to look at every basic card differently. So when we saw it in Magneto, it was both a hallelujah, we have another copy of this. We can have 2 players have it if you're playing all from one collection. But it also sort of meant that the way that the game needs to be designed is in keeping in mind that basic cards that cost 2 or more don't exactly cost 2 or more. And obviously we've always had the basic energies, the genius, strength, and energy. But the power in all of us really changes things. And so when I look at Sorcerer Supreme, I look at Ironheart, Limitless Stamina, Sky Destroyer, and Unshakable, I see cards that need like Sky Destroyer very well might be reprinted in the Shield Wave. I don't know that it will be, because I think that also looking at the game as when did Fantasy Flight start keeping in mind this legacy versus current environment. I know that there are people within the community that think that that's just kind of a term. Fantasy Flight's not even going to think about that. They're not going to think about really what they're putting in. But the thing is, if you're going to balance your scenarios against something, you need to think about what that something is. And so if you're just designing heroes and hero packs willy-nilly, but then you're going to be like, well, I guess hypothetically, if we were to like just make a scenario, but we're not designing scenarios and hero packs in tandem in a way where this actually means, like, I get it, and this probably should have been at the end, but we're deep enough into the thing that you're committed. I'm not a game designer. I don't know all the answers, but my gut says that if you're going to say that this current and legacy thing is not only because to some degree it is impractical to just assume that 15 years worth of content is always going to be available, and that's including Arkham Horror. To say that all that time, nearly 15 years of all of that content is always going to be on a shelf and in print is impractical. At some point, the line needs to get drawn. I wish Fantasy Flight had been more specific and said, starting in 2026, this is the line. The mutant wave is the line, and then in 2027, we're gonna chop off Mutant Genesis, and we're gonna just move forward with that, so that you know everything that's being designed is being designed with this card pool in mind. For legacy players, this doesn't change anything. If you've been playing for a long time, or you just are a completionist, you have everything already, this doesn't change anything for you. But for new players, I think it should be a fair game to say, this is the stuff that you should expect to be on shelves in August of 2026, or in July of 2027. Like, this is what a player should be able to walk in, and this is what they're going to see. And to stay on topic, I think that overall, Sorcerer Supreme is a very specific card, and I realize why it's going to be missed, and I also realize why for some people it's a card that nobody thinks about, because if you're not a Magic, Scarlet Witch, or Doctor Strange player, you don't think about this card, which is the reason why I don't think it's going to see a reprint anytime soon. Unless they do another Doctor Strange, which they very well could. I think Doctor Strange and Captain America are on the short list for heroes we will see a redo on or a return to. Those are the short list. And to some degree, I kind of like there's like heroes like Thor, I don't care to see a re-return. I'll definitely buy it. I'll definitely enjoy it, but I'm not sitting there being like, you need to fix this. Hulk, another character I think probably needs to get a fix on, which is probably where we would see a Limitless Stamina or an Unshakable be reprinted. I'm filling up time because actually, honestly, Basic is the hardest one for me to really stake a claim on, because they could reprint any of these cards at any time. But I do think that in terms of a top 5, Sorcerer Supreme is the card that I will miss the most if it is not brought back into current. Next up, we have Justice, which was a very tight race. And for a good stretch of time, actually, the bottom one did not see any votes. So I was kind of questioning if I made a mistake. But we have Justice, we have Under Surveillance, Clear the Area, one way or another, Counterintelligence, and the secret card was Turn the Tide. Once again, there's another card where I think I like it. I don't know that the community is big on Turn the Tide anymore. I think it was a good card at the time. I think it's kind of fallen off. But the winner here was One Way or Another. And sorry, it's so close. The winner here is Under Surveillance. My mistake. I would put as like of this list, the one that I would probably miss the most out of Justice, and is easily a number 2. I like all 3 of the main contenders. These polls have been up for a week now, but like Under Surveillance, Clear the Area, and one way or another, were basically indistinguishable. They were like 33%, 33%, 33% for most of like the first day and a half. And I think Under Surveillance is an easy pick because I think a lot of people play solo. I based on my video on pairs, where my top 5 from a week or so ago, where I talked about my favorite characters to team up against each other. A lot of the comments on Reddit, a lot of the comments on YouTube seem to point to the fact that a lot of people don't play the game two-handed solo, which is fair. It is a lot of brain power. And if you're going to play, I think it makes sense that you'd say, I'm just a solo player. I'm just going to play every scenario solo. The game is, I think, very well designed around that power level. I think that the game changes in like 2, 3, 4 player, but I understand why people don't play. If you're just playing by yourself, if you don't have a lot of other people, I think the game is wonderful, but I also understand the game is still pretty small. Under Surveillance makes a lot of sense because that has the most impact in solo. And I can see why people would look at it and say, I'm really going to miss Under Surveillance because that made scenarios easier. That made it so that even if you're not looking at it to be easier, it made it so that you can play riskier because you don't need to worry about exactly what was printed on the main scheme. That said, I do think that Clear the Area is a very strong card. I think that one way or another is maybe my most played Justice card. And that one is one that I will miss. Counterintelligence, I actually thought was going to be a little bit more popular because I do think that it is a very strong card. But I also understand that like if you're not a completionist, you don't have the Black Widow pack, you don't have Counterintelligence. And if you're just a Justice player who doesn't necessarily care about what Counterintelligence brings to the table, then that's another thing. I think additionally, it's entirely possible Counterintelligence will be reprinted a month from now. When we get the Shield box, Counterintelligence might be right there, ready to play. And so I think that's an easy one to say. I'm not really concerned about that. I don't think that's what was going through the head of the people in the community who are voting. This got 84 votes. But I will say that I fully agree. Counterintelligence, Under Surveillance. I fully agree that Under Surveillance is the card that I think I'm going to miss the most, and I think that the community is going to miss the most if it does not see a reprint. And my number 1 is out of the aggression aspect, and it was between Martial Prowess, Hall of Heroes, Bring It, Pitchback, and then the secret card that just didn't make the list was Follow Through. Hey, so editing hero here. Let me just get ahead of this real quick because I can almost hear the voices just screaming out, where is Hone Technique? Let's be honest here real quick. Hone Technique is probably not seeing a reprint anytime soon. Hone Technique is the kind of card that I feel like is the reason why we are getting the Legacy and Current environment. It is a card that is hard to balance your scenarios around when it exists, and it puts demand on the Nova pack in a way that I feel like you're going to really be feeling in 2 or 3 years. So yes, I am aware that Hone Technique exists. It was not eligible because I would be out of my damn mind if I thought that that card was going to get a fair shake in the future. And the one that won out of aggression was Martial Prowess. I agree. I think that Martial Prowess and its other aspect equivalents are evergreen enough that I wish that if they made a core set too, I'd like Martial Prowess and the cards that basically do the same thing for a defense event and for a thwart event. I would love those to just be in that evergreen product so that they're always around. It does change things a little bit, but I do think that each of those 3, because I don't think there's a leadership one. If there is, then I just never use it. That does it like specifically for allies or something, but actually we could probably get one for side schemes going forward. I think Martial Prowess is so well balanced, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it's well balanced in the fact that it is strong. It provides a resource outlet for aggression, which feels like the aspect that might have the most economy problems, but it is very specific to it needs to be an attack event. Martial Prowess feels like the perfect aggression card, and if we lose it for even an extended period of time in Current, and you want to challenge yourself and play in Current, that's going to be one that I do think you're going to feel. Hall of Heroes, I'm happy that it came in second. Hall of Heroes might be the card that, out of everything that we're losing, I might miss the most, because one, I think it is a card that is not going to get reprinted anytime soon, unless we do like a Jane Foster Thor or we do Secret Wars and we get to see an Allison Blair Thor. Like, unless we go really outside of the box, I don't see Hall of Heroes being reprinted because it has the Asgard aspect. That really shouldn't matter if you're putting it into just an aggression pack. I feel like that all the traits shouldn't necessarily matter, but I think that is probably something that Fantasy Flight considers. So that's one we're probably not going to see. I'm surprised Bring It didn't get more votes, because I actually think that in my mind, that's a very popular aggression card. And maybe I'm wrong, and clearly I might be wrong. And then Pitchback, I think, is probably just a card that I happen to favor quite a bit, but I can understand how it's just not something that other people think about. It's also hard because I do think that I put up the most staple card in the game within aggression as one of the options. And so if we don't see it again, I understand why a lot of votes gravitated to Martial Prowess. So that is the list of the community voted, and then me filtering it through a list of cards that I'm going to miss if they get retired into Legacy permanently and we don't see them again. Kind of already went on my rant a little bit, and maybe I will come back and do an entire video just about my thoughts on Legacy Current. I wrote an article that came out last Friday. I haven't really put a lot of other thought into it, and it's hard because I think that the discussion is moving so quickly day by day that for me to put out something and even put a 24-hour kick out on it, be like, this will come out tomorrow, whatever day I happen to work on it, I feel like that information, that thought process might already be behind. But until next time, we'll see you later and have a great day, and thank you for your time.